Thank you, Mike. So we now invite Roger Lemaitre, CEO of UEX Corporation. Roger is an engineer and a geologist with over 20 years experience that included Director of Worldwide Exploration for Cameco. While growing uranium resources through exploration and discovery of Christie Lake, focus is also being paid to Westbury cobalt nickel production. Prospect.
I like that. Sounds good.
We're good.
Wow, this is good because I've been here for the last couple of years, and I've had the fortunate. They've always scheduled me after the next gen or fission, and there's been a mass exodus, so I'm really happy. My name is Roger Lemaitre, and I have the pleasure to talk to you about UEX Corporation and our cobalt, nickel, and uranium assets. There we go. I will be making some forward-looking statements, so please take that in mind and move forward. And you got to read faster than my ears guys did. One of the things about us that I really like, you've been hearing about some US assets in some other places, is our competitive advantage being in the world's #3 mining jurisdiction as of the Fraser Institute's Friday new investment survey. But not only is it the 3rd best place to invest, it's the 1st best place in the world for policy. So we're great. We have, from a Saskatchewan point of view, we have a very experienced team. We're not a huge team, but very experienced and involved in several discoveries. And we have a unique understanding of Athabasca-style cobalt nickel deposits. So, like I said, we're a two-phase company right now. We have uranium assets, 10 uranium deposits, almost 100 million pounds of resources, a huge portfolio of opportunities. And while I like to sit here and say we're going to be in production tomorrow, that's not true. We need to see price recovery in uranium, but we have projects that are ready to start moving forward when that happens. And we'll touch on those here in a few minutes. We also have the 2nd cobalt resource in Canada, one of the few in North America, on an emerging style of deposit that many people haven't seen. And we've shown you here a 50-cent discovery cost year to date. And we'll focus in that area first. And so we believe in the long-term electric vehicle growth that's going to drive cobalt production as the battery maker. But the big challenge, and I won't get into the dynamics, Dave here is one of the experts you can talk to about that, is that most of the cobalt and foreseeable future, even cobalt growth, is going to come out of the DRC. Politically unstable, bit of challenge from an ethical and conflict-free point of view. We believe there's a lot of room for North American supplied cobalt and nickel, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about that. This is where our Westbury project comes into play. Like I said, we have one of the few cobalt resources in North America. We own only 2 in Canada at a very low cost. But we also have a uranium project located in what we've done when we looked at this asset. It's in the eastern part of the Athabasca Basin. If you were to turn the clock back in uranium and say Athabasca is not a uranium district, but a cobalt district, where would you start? East side, shallow, lots of conductors, infrastructure blessed, and that's where we're starting at Westbury. The other thing about the style deposits that we're looking at is what I call cobalt-driven cobalt. 99% of all cobalt in the world today is a byproduct of nickel or copper production. So if cobalt starts to move or you need more cobalt, well, sure, your DRC cobalt mine could ramp up, and sure, your laterites could ramp up, but they're going to have to sell a whole lot more copper and nickel. If you want to be in a cobalt play that supports cobalt at Westbury in blue there is the percent in situ value of cobalt compared to other minerals in the rock, per ton of rock. Compare that to what you see around the rest of the world. Westbury is a cobalt-driven cobalt project. Last year, we did our first holes into this program since 2005. I'm pretty proud of our team. We went from starting from scratch in November to getting a 43101 resource out by the beginning of July. And that red outline here is the resource. The dots here color code based on grade, and you can see red is above 1% cobalt, which is a pretty unusual grade to see around the world. And it's wide open for expansion to the west and to the southeast particularly. Orange is above 0.5%, and yellow is above 0.25%. Substantial amount of resources, but open-ended in all directions, but and particularly really good grades. You don't see, I think if you were to look at the best cobalt intersections in the world last year, 3 of them come out of those 5 or 6 holes right there. Particularly the note too, while our resource is not necessarily huge, the 4 holes on the bottom here don't even make it into the resource due to the lovely aspects of 43101 and pit dynamics. I won't get into that. But as we expand the resource to the west, those will start to come in, including the 5%, almost 5% cobalt over 8 meter intersection down in the resource. Like I said, open for expansion into the southeast, the north, to the west, and to the northeast. And what we found is that this style of deposit, while it's unique to the Athabasca today, and this is one of a kind today, we think there's many more opportunities. And the reason to find these things, the reason why is that we're finding them in the same systems that you find structurally and hydrothermally associated uranium deposits. Like we see here, in blue is the cobalt deposit resources as it's today. In red is the historical 1976 discovery of the Westbury uranium deposit. So why is that important? We'll look through a cross-section right through here to start to set that up. This is the cross-section through the existing resource. You can see the grades are pretty impressive. We have it dominantly hosted in a structured graphitic peelite. If you were looking for basic uranium deposits, this is exactly where you look for them. This section here is looking 200 meters to the west of the existing resource. The red there is the Westbury uranium deposit. The gray is the graphitic peelite below. And the blue lines on those drill holes, since they were only drilled to 25 to 30 meters depth, just to the bottom of and below the uranium deposit is where we're seeing cobalt. So we're seeing cobalt outside the uranium deposit, extending down dip of the uranium deposit. Why is that important? When you compare that to this cross-section, we'll superimpose it on a typical cross-section through the cobalt deposit, as you see here on the left-hand side. The area with perspective for cobalt extends 100 meters down dip, and it hasn't seen many drill holes. And so this year, we're actively drilling through all those sections from the west side of the cobalt deposit through to underneath the uranium deposit to see what we can do to expand things. So right now, we're in the middle of a $4.25 million 105 to 160 hole program, 17,000 meters. You get a lot of bang for your buck when you're drilling holes that are only 75 to 100 meters deep max. Meanwhile, we're also looking in the neighborhood to see what we can find. We have, and part of this is interesting because it's a little bit of forensic geology, we like to call it. We have paper information that tells us things, but when people were working back in the 70s and 80s, they didn't uniformly sample basement rocks. They'd take a 1 foot section or 6 inch section and send it off for analysis. See, oh, I wonder what's in here. And it's amazing the number of cobalt and nickel, more nickel than cobalt, because cobalt wasn't even assayed in the 70s and most of the 80s, that are found in these little chunks of rocks that were never sampled like you'd sample for a typical 43101 resource. So you're trying to go out there and find little pieces of this puzzle and turn them into something else. We think there's many, many more of these opportunities across the basin. And just in the last month, we were able to find some rocks nearby Westbury, just to the south on that parallel structure, that actually have surprisingly more cobalt and nickel, but over tiny little chunks. So we are also, meanwhile, we're working at Westbury, we're exploring the neighborhood around it. We're particularly interested in testing some of the targets on the north rim of this, of the what we call the Westbury Dome, where the prospective rocks are, and particularly interested, we're seeing exactly the same signatures we're seeing at Westbury, particularly in that area where the red arrow is, we call the Umberville target. So, like we said, there's a lot of types of cobalt deposit out there where you're seeing cobalt as a byproduct. Westbury doesn't fit any of those. We're calling it the cobalt-related or cobalt-related cobalt deposit, and it's kind of like the blind man trying to describe an elephant. And so we're in the early days. We don't know what this animal looks like, but I want to sit there back and think about all the holes drilled, particularly in the eastern Athabasca Basin. You know, they often, let's say they were the guy here that's touching this, it's a spear guy. They were absolutely convinced in their exploration technology that they were going to find a rhinoceros. They touched the spear to find a rhinoceros. We're going to find a rhinoceros come hell or high water. They never decided to go looking for an elephant. And I think that's what we're doing in the cobalt space. So switching gears and going to our extensive uranium portfolio, we have 18 uranium projects all in the Athabasca. 4 that I'd like to just touch upon, as you see here. At Christie Lake, we have the only junior package directly between Cigar Lake and MacArthur River. We have the extension of the P2 fault structure. And while we've done work there for the last 2.5 to 3 years, we focus on a very small part in that right-hand side, the little teeny box, around the existing deposits that we've grown and found. And so this year, while we focused completely in that blue area, found the Aurora deposit 2 years ago, we haven't looked across the rest of the deposit yet, so we're starting the second phase of our exploration program. And the first focus will be along that C red line conductor trend. We know uranium deposits in the Athabasca Basin often form along trends, like pearls along a string. So we have, they're anywhere between 1 to 5 kilometers long. Our Shea Creek project in the western side of the basin, good example where we're finding mineralization over multiple deposits over 3 kilometers, and I can list almost every mineralized trend does that. There are no drill holes past the Paul Bay deposit. That purple line, what we found in the last couple of years is that we're not trying to test the conductor directly, we're trying to direct just beside the conductor. So you can see the deposits as they go to the east are sitting a little bit off that conductor. There's not a single drill hole in that section. And we'll be looking at drilling that here after we do our program here at Restivity that will help us guide where we want to be in that area. And meanwhile, on the parallel trend just to the north, we're seeing pretty substantial cobalt below the conforming ground structure that is yet to be followed up. We haven't even drilled a hole in any of the southern conductors. There's tens of kilometers down there. At our Horseshoe Raven project, we own this 100%. It's on the eastern basin, right next door to the Rabbit Lake Mill. It's one of the shallowest deposits, maybe relatively low grade compared to what you see in the Athabasca Basin, but I would call it blessed with what I call direct access grades, meaning you can actually get in there and mine it without having to put in the special high protected radiation measures you see in other places. It's got conventional mining capacity, so you don't have to invent freezing technology or something to get this to work, and we certainly don't have the water issues that we see in some of the Athabasca Basin because we're off the edge. And while we've done a 2011 PDA, we know the price isn't there because it's a $45 break-even price. In a more robust market, it's certainly got good economics. We've also been looking at the heap leach possibilities as well. We see favorable costs compared to the scoping study and other work we've done in 2016, and we'll be working a little bit more on that to move that project forward in advance of what we see as recovering uranium prices. At Shea Creek, our partner is Uranium. We see four deposits found in the mid to late 2000s. We're still like to move forward with that project. There's a extensive amount of trend that hasn't seen a lot of drilling at this point in time. And UEX is currently going, this is a wireframe of the deposits in our 43101. Red is the classic unconformity deposit, blue are the basement deposits. You can see the basement deposits form a little bit of a plunge into the basement, to the bottom to the east, along the main fault structure. But we do find those basement mineralization zones tend to form where that fault structure is intersected by an east-west fault structure. And what we're doing is we're working through the deposits right now, looking for opportunities where that basement mineralization hasn't been looked at. And we've just started this a couple weeks ago. We've already identified a particular interest target here in the north end of Colette. We'll work our way through it to the south. At Hidden Bay, what I like about Hidden Bay, Eastern Basin, looked for classic unconformity uranium deposits, but nobody ever looked in the basement. So you can look at that and say, okay, 1,800 drill holes drilled in what I call the box, where the graphitic package and structure hit the unconformity, but the newer deposits like you're finding today are being found in the basement down below. Those basement deposits, they show smoke and fire in that box, but no one on Hidden Bay has ever just had to look down dip into the basement. So we'll be looking at that again here in the coming year. So on the horizon, we'll be looking more at Christie Lake, continue to develop an economic resource base there, hopefully. Horseshoe Raven will be encouraging, or we're doing work on our heap leaching testing and moving it in advance of what we see in recovering markets. Focusing on basement targets at Hidden Bay, and then trying to realize value for our cobalt assets with our shareholders. We did intend to do a spin out last year. Unfortunately, cobalt markets conspired against us, and a few equity markets in cobalt did as well. But meanwhile, while we're waiting for that right opportunity to realize cobalt value, we're looking at expanding, finding more deposits right in the Westbury area. And with that, that's our company. If you need to know more about us, if you don't have time for questions, or even if you want to ask more questions, we're over at booth 2429. We'd love to talk to you. Thank you very much.